as loud as I expected. It was really loud when we were trying to figure this out earlier, like blow your eardrums out. And because this is pre-recorded, by the way, what's happening?
He's just hitting continue.
Because this is pre-recorded, basically, if at any point you need us to stop, or you can say, "Oh, edit that out," let us know, because this can be very flexible. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable with what's going out there and that it makes everything sound good and represents both of us well.
So I can say, "Oh, let's do that one again."
Yep,
absolutely.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah,
very good.
Definitely. So if you're ready, we will get started.
Okay, let's go.
Ready, and
I think we're ready. All right. So this is our very first Zoom interview. So you can see our awesome guest who
we can see people.
Yeah. I'm very excited to introduce our guest because I actually got to work with her a couple years ago. So this is really exciting for me. And today we have Dr. Donna Shaver, who is the chief of the Division of Sea Turtle and Science Recovery at Padre Island National Seashore, and the Texas A&M University of Kingsville Distinguished Alumni in 2020. So welcome, Dr. Shaver. We're happy to have you here.
Welcome.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, we are. Like I said, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. When we started this, I was like, I know the person to interview, because you have a really cool program here that's nearby Kingsville, out in Corpus Christi, and y'all are doing really cool things.
Absolutely. I mean, I was excited. I was like, what? You know her?
Yes.
Oh, how cool is that? Yeah. So this is very exciting. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, not only did she know me, but I also have ties to your university. So that makes it doubly special.
Yes.
We're part of the family there. So,
mm-hmm.
and my time at your university was really important in my development as an ecologist and a conservation-minded biologist. So this is special. I'm glad to be here.
It is special, and I'm really glad that I'm really glad to see people like you honored for your achievements with things like distinguished alumni and stuff like that. Very well deserved. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
So let's start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do as chief of the Division of Sea Turtle Science and Recovery.
Well, I have been working with sea turtles right here in South Texas since 1980. I started at Padre Island National Seashore between my junior and senior years of undergraduate school at Cornell University. Back in the day when bulletin boards were cork boards on the board, there was a Student Conservation Association brochure that listed positions all over the country. And I read about the one at Padre Island National Seashore, working with the sea turtles. And I was a wildlife biology major, but I was not so much interested in game management. I was more interested in conservation and especially endangered species, threatened and endangered species conservation work. And so when I read about that opportunity, yes, that's what I want to apply for. And I was fortunate enough to get the position. And I came down here to South Texas and I just fell in love with South Texas. The friendly people, of course, I'd never been to the ocean before. And I was just captivated with that. And I'd never even seen a sea turtle before. And when I heard about the plight of the Kemp's Ridley and how the population had plummeted due to human activities, and some feared it was even too late to save it. And I was involved in this Hail Mary project to try to save it. And right on the ground floor, it had been envisioned and started in the 70s, and I started in 1980. And I decided right then that I wanted to dedicate my career to trying to help save the Kemp's Ridley turtles. And I had a lot of naysayers that that's not a career. I mean, it sounds like more like a hobby, but no, I wanted it to be, what I did for my career. And I've been blessed to have had opportunities so that it could be what I did for the course of my career. And so I was a seasonal biologist as I was finishing up my master's program at Texas A&M. Well, it was Texas A&I University. Now it's Texas A&M Kingsville. And then I got a permanent position with the National Park Service. And then I went into the Natural Resources Management Trainee Program. And by that time, I'd already really been bitten by the bug of science and research, and I'd written some publications, and which I did on my own. I didn't have a supervisor who was encouraging me to do this. It was something that I wanted to do, and Dr. Cheney had been my major professor for my degree, and he was major professor for a lot of folks that went on to be very prominent biologists. And he encouraged me to try to publish some things, and I ended up becoming a research grade scientist for the National Park Service in the early 1990s. And then Bruce Babbitt reorganized the researchers in Department of Interior, and I was moved to the National Biological Survey, which became National Biological Service, which was merged with the USGS. And for 10 years, I was in that research organization. And it was formed, the idea behind this was it aggregated the researchers from all the Department of Interior agencies to try to remove that research from the land management agencies so the managers wouldn't have the opportunity to possibly taint or sway any research findings. They would just be what they were and stand on their own without interference, which was really good in theory. Unfortunately, though, there wasn't a lot of support for science funding for that organization. It was moved into USGS, but during the course of that time, we had turtles that came back from a large project that I'll talk about in more detail a little bit later. We had some turtles come back from that, and I was in poverty in USGS. Not even enough money to cover my salary was transferred over. And I was the station leader of the Padre Island Field Research Station. So I was still at Padre Island National Seashore, and I had the sea turtle responsibilities. But as my proposal started gaining more momentum after we started turtles coming back from this experimental project, this Hail Mary, and we got a lot of media attention for our work, and the nesting numbers started to come up. The National Park Service wanted me and the sea turtle work to come back. So they asked me for about 5 years, come back. And I ended up coming back to the National Park Service. They said they started the work, they loved the work, they would support the work, they wanted me back. We'd work together to get the base increase to give the permanent funding that the project needed so that it had a reliable source of funding from year to year, because the endangered species conservation work with an animal with such a, it's 15 years to maturity. You don't get instant results. You don't save the species in a 3-year funding cycle. I was trying to make do for our patrols on grant money from year to year. It was just hand to mouth. And which I'm sure you know very well, the cycles of those. And so we did work together. We got that base increase when I came back in 2003. So I've been the chief of the Padre Island Division of Sea Turtle Science and Recovery since 2003. I said, well, if I came back, I needed a division just for that, because it's such a big program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There isn't a state-run sea turtle program in Texas like there is in Florida and Georgia and South Carolina and the Atlantic coast. There aren't those programs for Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, or Texas. So the sea turtle stranding and nesting work on the Texas coast has been done by an aggregation of groups who cared and were pitching in to make the work happen. But it takes money.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even know the other states I didn't even know there were states who did have that. So
Yeah, they've got state sea turtle biologists and money to do the work and oversee the stranding and nesting work. We don't have that here.
no. Yeah.
So the
it's all
National
wrong.
Park Service, the National Park Service actually started the stranding network in Texas, and we started the nesting program in Texas. And so because of our starting that, and I've been Texas coordinator of the Sea Turtle Stranding and Salvage Network for 30 years now, ever since the National Park Service employee who started it retired. He handed it over to me. So because of our expertise, we help train those other projects and get them up and running, because these turtles are a shared resource, just like so many wildlife species. And we have to work together if we're going to save these animals. So,
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, thank you. And the job is, so I am the Texas coordinator of Sea Turtle Stranding and Salvage Network. We provide training and leadership and oversight to the nesting and stranding sea turtle programs in Texas. And we only have 5 nesting programs in Texas to cover the whole Gulf Coast, which is really different than Florida, where they've got all these like 100 small programs where the people that live in that area run these little NGO programs that do their work. So we're different with these 5 programs. So we help to make sure that they have training and everybody's collecting data the same way. We produce the manual for Texas. We aggregate the records, report out on the records for Texas. And then I do associated research for the stranded and nesting turtles. Satellite, I've done a lot of satellite tracking work for the post-nesting Kemp's Ridley turtles, some of the males, and juveniles for my PhD work at Texas A&M College Station. Whoop. I did that. My dissertation was on green turtles. So I did a lot of work with green turtles.
Oh, okay, I'm going to pause real fast. Our tech has to go to class. So he's going to open a door real fast. So
Thank you, Trey.
I can't hear you, but I just wanted to say
Trey's
thank
right
you
here.
for all of your work and leading the way for women. My 2 first biology professors were females, and Dr. Rideout has made a great impact on me, and so become an activist. Keep fighting.
Thank you. Well, if you hear of anybody trying to save me, help them out. I can't start the program to do that. So
spread the word.
Yes, spread the word. We are.
It says you're still recording.
Yeah,
It is.
Okay.
We'll
cut that out.
Cut that out.
Yeah, that's going to be all cut out.
That's why we have technicians, so they can
make us sound good.
Thank you, Trey.
Bye.
So we can
Yes. Okay.
not sound like idiots later.
Well, you used to have a radio station over there. It looks like you've got radio broadcast microphones.
We ordered them.
Oh, you ordered them? Wow.
Yeah.
We got money from Harvey Weil. So
we got the Harvey Weil grant, and this year
That's great.
You might be familiar with Harvey Weil, but this year was their 25th their
25th wedding anniversary.
This year was the 25th anniversary for the Harvey Weil program, and they gave $100,000 grant, just one, and we got it for this podcast. So we were able to buy all this awesome equipment and the technicians, because I had the idea, but I knew I couldn't do it myself. And so, yeah, without that Harvey Weil grant, we would not be here today. So yeah.
Good. Well, good for you. I've heard of that, and the Conservationist of the Year awards, and they need to do more women on those too.
I agree.
But I'm glad you got the grant. That's great.
Thank you.
All right, so let's get back into it. So just a brief overview. What is the Division of Sea Turtle Science and Recovery, and what kind of work is being done there?
Well, we're like the name, we incorporate the aspects of the name, the sea turtle science. We have 3 primary approaches to the work to try to help understand and conserve these species. So we've got research, conservation, and public education. And what I view is like a triangle with each feeding into each other, because they're all important elements. We are sharing this world, people and turtles. And we're not some of the states where they just kick people out of places so that the animals can have it to themselves. So we have to educate the public, the do's and don'ts. There's ways that they can help us by reporting nesting turtles. So we make brochures and posters and signs and handouts and social media posts and website material to encourage them to report and to try to teach them the things that they should not do, things that we want them to avoid so they do not inadvertently harm the turtles. And so that's a big aspect of what we do. The research and conservation really go hand in hand and integrate into each other. Our research is conservation-based research. We don't do any of the very basic research, like what's the function of this gland, or what, what's the genealogy, the ancestral linkage of historic sea turtles. That's not the kind of work we do. We're trying to get the information for the here and now to help us save these turtles from extinction. We work with all 5 sea turtle species, but most of our work is with the endangered Kemp's Ridley turtle, and then secondly, the threatened green turtle. So for the Kemp's Ridley, we've got a more than 40-year-long project to try, it's binational in scope, to try to form a secondary nesting colony of the critically endangered Kemp's Ridley sea turtle at Padre Island National Seashore as a safeguard against extinction, so that if a political or environmental catastrophe was to occur in Mexico, there'd be a safe area in the US where Kemp's Ridleys could nest and be protected. And Padre Island National Seashore was selected as that location because Kemp's Ridley is a native nester to South Texas. And in fact, the first published record of Kemp's Ridley's nesting anywhere in the world was a Kemp's Ridley that nested at Padre Island National Seashore before it was designated as a unit of the national park system.
Wow.
But going back in time to how this project started was, for many, many years, no one knew where Kemp's Ridley turtles nested. It was thought that maybe it was even a hybrid. So there was 2 primary biologists that were trying to find this nesting area. Dr. Henry Hildebrand, who's got ties to your university, A&M Corpus Christi, and our Corpus Christi area, and then Archie Carr from Florida. And Henry Hildebrand was, I got to know Dr. Henry Hildebrand a little bit when I was a graduate student. And he was a shy person like I was, and I still am. But I've had to try to do the best I could to get out of that so I could speak for the turtles, because I have to. But very unassuming. He was a fisheries biologist, but he knew a lot about sea turtles too. And he went down he was fluent in Spanish, went down to Mexico, and he had heard about a film that was made that showed an estimated 40,000 Kemp's Ridley turtles nesting on this 14-mile stretch of beach in Tamaulipas, Mexico, at a town called Rancho Nuevo. And the Mexican engineer that had taken that film, Dr. Andre Herrera, somebody's bothering me here, a little Karen Terrier, that little helper for our interview here,
Cute.
little furry helper. His name's Kempy. And so the Mexican engineer had heard about these large aggregations of turtles that came up on this stretch of beach near Rancho Nuevo, and he wanted to film it. He was a private pilot. He had a plane, and he flew over, And he filmed an Arabata in 1947 that had an estimated 40,000 females nesting on this 14-mile stretch of beach.
Wow.
Yeah, it's, I still get chills when I see this film, and it's available on YouTube. It's Arabata, Rancho Nuevo, and it's amazing. There's so many turtles. They're crawling over each other. They're digging each other's eggs up. There's so many turtles. Well, he thought this was really special. He tried to get it advertised in Time magazine, Life magazine, by Disney, and nobody would publish it. He couldn't get any bites on that. And so when Henry went down, he heard about this film and this Mexican engineer. They got together. He saw the film and he found, voila, that's where Kemp's Ridley turtles nest. He brought it to a herpetological conference in Austin, Texas. It was shown there. He invited Archie Carr to come over from Florida and see the film. And so there it was. They found the primary nesting beach for Kemp's Ridley turtles. But what they also found in that film was the large scale mounding of eggs from those nests. They were taken off by the large sacks full and put in wagons and carted off and sold as supposed aphrodisiacs. And so when the nesting beach was found, then coordination began with biologists from Mexico. They started going to the nesting beach in the mid-60s, but they found that the number of turtles in those aggregations, those arabatas, had dwindled. The population had already plummeted. And it continued to plummet, so much that Archie Carr and Henry Hildebrand became very concerned that the species was going to be lost because the numbers just kept dwindling and dwindling and dwindling. And there was only one area where they nested that had been found. So Henry Hildebrand happened to be a neighbor of Robert Whistler, who worked at Padre Island National Seashore. They lived just a couple of houses from each other. And Henry told Robert about the plight of the Kemp's Ridley. And together they started the project in our resources management plan, the 1974 resources management plan for Padre Island National Seashore, to form this secondary nesting colony of Kemp's Ridley turtles as a safeguard for the species, and to repopulate this nesting species to Padre Island National Seashore, because the National Park Service does not introduce non-indigenous species, but this is a native species that we thought we needed to restore there. And hats off to them. They didn't know about the, they were thinking, don't have all your eggs in one basket in case there's a political or environmental catastrophe. They didn't know at that time about climate change and how incubation temperature determines the sex of the turtles, with warmer temperatures producing primarily females. Some nesting beaches are now producing 100% females.
Wow.
Also, the temperature is very important in whether the eggs hatch at all. If it gets too hot, it can kill them. And there are some nesting beaches in the world where the sand is now too hot to produce viable hatchlings. So that's a really important safety net that we could provide, because we're a little further north, our beach temperatures are a little bit cooler, produce a few more males.
That's cool. So by moving them north, that just and it just happened that they were moving them north. But yeah, like you say, safety net, so important.
It was a safety net, and also the political or a cultural catastrophe. They didn't know about the drug cartels. As you know, you have a lot of cross-boundary projects there from your university. It's dangerous down in Mexico now, much more dangerous than when I was a graduate student in the early 80s. And we used to go into Mexico for field trips routinely.
Did you really?
Yeah. Yep. And it was so educational, and it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
But that's not possible now. It's dangerous. And the work on the nesting beaches occurs because of a gentleman's agreement. And at any time, they could say, nope, turtle biologists, we don't want you here anymore. We would rather take the turtles. We'd rather take the eggs. We don't want you seeing what we're doing. And one of the camps actually was fenced off, and the equipment was taken, and they don't have the opportunity to get to it anymore. So I didn't start that project. So that the kernel of the binational program was the Park Service effort to form the secondary nesting colony, 1974. And so Robert Whistler talked to a chief scientist from the National Park Service who got agencies from across the US that would be involved, like NOAA, US Fish and Wildlife Service, the leading sea turtle biologists of the time, and there were just a handful, to get together and write this binational action plan to try to help this Hail Mary, to try to help save the species. And part of that was the effort to form the secondary nesting colony. And another, the most significant part, of course, was to provide US aid down at the nesting beach in Rancho Nuevo for the protection of the eggs from predators and from poachers. And so the US sent down folks into Mexico to, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop because my dog has got a quacking toy here. I'm going to put him outside my door.
We heard a little jingle.
Yeah, this is
They're,
why
they're recording.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're
My,
fine.
You're fine.
my husband's getting him. Sorry.
My dog does the same thing.
Okay. So the binational action plan was begun in 1978, and it included the translocation of 2,000 eggs per year from Mexico to Padre Island National Seashore. It was experimental. We didn't know whether we could cause the turtles that emerged from those eggs to hatch at Padre Island National Seashore, but that was the goal. And it was based around the imprinting hypothesis, where it is thought that sea turtles return to their natal beach much the same way that salmon return to their natal stream. So we tried to experimentally imprint the Kemp's Ridley turtles to Padre Island National Seashore by sending down Padre Island National Seashore sand to Rancho Nuevo. The eggs were collected from the nesting females in Mexico as they were laying them. The biologists came up behind them with a plastic bag, collected those eggs so they never touched the Rancho Nuevo sand. When the turtle is actually laying eggs, she's in a trance-like state. She's oblivious to what's going on around her. So the biologists were able to come up behind her and take her eggs without her even knowing it. So they brought the eggs back to their camp, placed them in the Padre Island sand in styrofoam boxes, and then they were shipped to the National Seashore for incubation. We had about 20 clutches per year. It's about 100 eggs per clutch. And so that went on from 78 to 88. Again, I joined in 1980. And the division that was working with this program at the park was really small. So I got hands-on experience with the eggs right from the beginning. In fact, I was the primary caretaker. There was me as a Student Conservation Association intern and one seasonal employee. Wow. Just one, a lot smaller than what it is today.
Yes.
Because we didn't have a program for detection of nests on the beach back then. There wasn't much nesting. Of course, we didn't go out to look for them. So there likely was nesting that went undetected, because finding Kemp's Ridley nests is really, it's tricky, it's difficult. Mm-hmm. But we just had, for our sea turtle work back then, the care for the eggs and in the Padre Island sand at the National Seashore. And then we released the hatchlings on the beach, allowed them to crawl down the beach and enter the surf and swim up to about knees depth of water. Then they were captured, brought back to the lab, counted, weighed, and measured, and sent to the Galveston National Marine Fisheries Service lab for rearing in captivity for 9 to 11 months. And that was called Head Starting. And it was about the same time as the program began for the kids, with the same theory in life. Well, let's give them a boost in life. Let's give them a better chance for when they get out there. They're going to be able to do better by being larger, right. Being able to, so their time in captivity, they were able to grow from the size of about a silver dollar to about the size of a dinner plate. And so at that point, really their only predator would be sharks, whereas as hatchlings, they're bite-sized to all kinds of predatory
Everybody.
fish.
Yeah. Wow.
And that time in Galveston also allowed them to be tagged for future recognition. And this was a conservation emergency, so they didn't have tagging mechanisms that would necessarily be useful. So they developed different types of tags. All the turtles received metal flipper tags, but those fall off in the wild after a few years. So over time, then they started using coded wire tags that are used in some fish studies, but you have to have a wand to read it. It's only presence or absence. You can't see the exact code until the animal is dead and you look at it under a microscope. And then also for our turtles from 1978 to 1988, they developed the living tag, which is like a skin graft where they took a piece of the bottom shell out, piece from the top out, and glued the piece from the bottom into the surrounding shell surface of the top, providing a permanent light identification marker on the darker background of the shell. And each scute designated a different year class or year when the turtle was hatched. And those weren't instituted until starting in 1982. And those have been the most useful in us finding returnees from that program.
I did not know that. So the part that you take from the bottom and you replace a scute on the top, does it so it just grows like a top scute would have?
It's a small plug that's about, when they take it, it's about the size of an eraser head.
Uh-huh.
And they take the same size out of the top and they glue that into the top. And yes, and then it grows right along with the scute.
So
you've got,
spot.
it's a light spot,
Neat.
but it grows in size, thankfully, because you will see quite a few small white spots on these turtles, but you're looking for something bigger and more distinctive.
Right. Did not know
Yep.
that.
So they developed that as the program went along. And then we stopped receiving eggs in 1988. Most of the turtles were released when they reached 9 to 11 months. Most were released into the Gulf off of South Texas, but there was a lot of variation in where these turtles were released. And I've got publications that talk about where these turtles came back into nest and how I hypothesized where they were released and began navigation in the free waters may have been important in setting where they come back to nest. Because over time, there's been more research done. And it appears that the turtles orient in relation to the Earth's magnetic field. So they may not have that compass set for where do I return to until they start that navigation process. But because, and I based that hypothesis on the findings of where we had turtles that came back from our experimental imprinting and head starting project that were experimentally imprinted to Padre Island. And then turtles that were from another effort that ran from 1989 to 1992, where there were hatchlings that were taken directly from Mexico and head started in Galveston with the hope that they would go back to Mexico in greater numbers to help compensate for the loss of the eggs to the Padre Island population. So they never touched Padre Island sand. They were reared in Galveston and they were released offshore. And again, though, unfortunately, a variety of locations, but it's including some off South Texas, but a lot of them off the upper Texas coast. And lo and behold, starting in 2002, we started seeing Kemp's Ridley nest for the first time north of the documented historic nesting range. So we started seeing them on Matagorda Island and northward, including around Galveston Island, Bolivar Peninsula. And so it may be that they were navigating back to their release location for the upper Texas coast. Mm-hmm. Because we didn't get our Padre Island turtles going back to Galveston. Only those Mexico imprinted head started turtles went back to Galveston.
Okay.
So, but there's complications. So there's more research to be done by you, Rebecca, and young people in the future. Rebecca. There's a lot of other questions out there still.
Yeah. Yes. I just want to say for anybody who's listening and thinks that the magnetic pole idea is a crazy theory, it's not at all. We know from bird from bird science, from avian scientists. We know from avian research. We know
From
from bat
insects.
research. Yeah, and some insects too. Many different species use the magnetic poles, and if we can switch the poles in captivity, we get them flying the wrong direction and stuff like that. So yeah, totally, totally doable theory. Yeah, totally plausible theory, I should say. Interesting.
Well, there's a lot of research that supports that that's how they navigate. It's just where, how it is exactly that they come back. And when that, see, normally it would be set, they'd just be normally released. They're going out from that natal beach. And so it would be a normal track where that compass would be set. But
Yeah.
for ours, released a year later, in what it would explain why they went to these different places to nest. So I cautioned in my literature that we need to think about that for the turtles that are brought into captivity for experimentation and where we release them, you might want to consider where that's done, because you don't want to have turtles come back as to nest in your area if it's unsuitable, because it's an unintended consequence of your research. You don't want to,
Good point.
have them have that fate because of what you did to them. So, so in 1986, I was in a permanent job over in my division that I wanted to be. Because to get my first permanent job, I had to be a radio dispatcher and fee collector, and then switch back over to my field. It's just, you had to take some twists and turns to get to where you wanted to be with your permanent status. It's hard to get that first permanent job with the federal government.
Yes,
It is.
yes, it
And
is.
you get
And
harder over time too.
and that was, from Shy Donna from Syracuse, New York, who dropped her speech class and ran as quick as she could to change to scientific writing. That was a hard gig to have, but probably was good in helping draw me out so I would feel more comfortable speaking.
Sure.
But it was 9 months, and then I was able to transfer back into my field, the division. It had a different name back then. And then my boss left. So I was acting division chief as a GS4 for 9 months. And my boss said, I want you to start the patrols to look for nesting turtles in 1986. We had no money for it. And they didn't know at what age they matured. It's thought, well, maybe because in captivity, some turtles had nested at 6 to 8 years of age, but they were fed well and didn't have to evade predators. So they matured really quickly compared to now what we know from research that we didn't know back then. So I had to start the patrols. We didn't have any money, so we had to have to beg, borrow vehicles, and have other people take us down island. So I started that program. And so we were the ones that started the first nesting patrols in Texas. And again, as we started to see these turtles come back from this experimental imprinting and head starting project, my proposals for funding became more competitive. I got more funding, and we were able to get more vehicles and build up the program. I felt it was really important that we are out there looking for returnees from this program from a scientific perspective, because what if some other people want to use these processes for their threatened or endangered species for conservation? And so from a scientific perspective, because there had never been a head-started sea turtle that had been confirmed to have nested in the wild, or a sea turtle experimentally imprinted to an area that was confirmed to have returned there to nest. And ours were the first. So they gave up. So it was a full 10 years of patrols. And during training, I started to feel like Linus in the pumpkin patch saying, have faith, they will come. 10 years of patrols, and the poor patrollers would come back with no nests, or we might be lucky to find 1 or 2 nests, every couple of years. We didn't find the first confirmed returnee until 1996, so full 10 years of patrolling.
Wow.
But then, like I said, we were able to start building up those patrols, and we started to find more records, but we found a lot of dead adult Kemp's Ridley turtles too. And then that led to my work with Texas Parks and Wildlife Department to form a closed area off the South Texas coast to shrimping, because they had jurisdiction over both the sea turtles in Texas and the shrimping industry. And we were finding more dead adult Kemp's Ridleys stranded in South Texas than at any other location in the US. Here was the place we were trying to have them come back to nest. And we didn't want to see those deaths. And there was a lot of evidence indicating that it was due to incidental capture. And the shrimping industry was much bigger then, and it was a much more controversial issue then. So it was a lot of work. It was about a year working with Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, providing stranding data, nesting data, and satellite tracking data. I had started by then, when I began working in 1998 on this revision of the shrimp fishery management plan. I'd already started the satellite tracking of the nesting females because I thought, I want to have some data upon which managers could base a closed area if they ever had the fortitude, the intestinal fortitude it would take to go through the process, which was very controversial, to form a time area closure to try to help protect these turtles. And we had some data, which was great, rather than just a guess of where we think they might go based on other species, which are different. So we worked together, and we did, after a lot of controversy, a letter written by the Texas Shrimp Association trying to get me fired, didn't work. I rebutted that the claims were just nonsensical. And so I had to just go through the process to rebut them. But it took about a solid month of work on that, rebutting all of that, sending it in. But the die was already cast. The Parks and Wildlife already had the information, already knew about the problem, and already were going to go through the process with their commission. And what was arrived at was a compromise. There were some environmental groups that wanted all Texas waters year round. That was not going to happen. So that's why it was so important that we kept exchanging the data and whittling it down for time and space of what would give the most protection with the least disruption to the industry.
Right.
So
that's important.
It is important, and that's one of the things for folks that are getting into this work, is that sometimes you're going to be drawn into some issues because you're an expert, and you speak for the data and tell the truth and try to do your best in that issue, because you are the expert and there's no other people. If they don't go to you and there's nobody else that's collecting that data, then there might not ever be the protection needed, or they base protection on scanty information and it's not adequate.
Right.
So we have continued to build the program over time. As I said, when I came back to the Park Service, and it's a large program now with about 40 seasonal employees instead of the one, and 100 volunteers instead of the one that I was. And we need everybody, because we patrol 80 miles of beachfront, all of North Padre Island, from about 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. because Kemp's Ridleys, unlike the other sea turtles, they nest mostly during the day. That's why public education is absolutely critical, because that's when our beach users are most abundant on the beach. And we don't close our beaches at night like some beaches on the East Coast to close their beaches at night. We don't do that. Well, and or during the day for that matter. We don't do that. So we patrol all during the day, and we crisscross because we want to be able to see the nesting turtle if we can. And they only take about 45 minutes to nest. They crawl up the beach. They dig a hole with their rear flippers. You'll see Sandra going in the air. They'll be motionless and in that trance-like state for about 15 minutes. They'll cover their nest with this vigorous rocking back and forth, tamping it down. And I've had a visitor explain it to me as, I saw a turtle dancing. And I said,
I would agree
it
with
nested.
that.
It nested. So did you find a nester when you were with us?
Yes, I ended up finding I was the first staff member to find one. The first two turtles a visitor reported in, and we had a weird year coming in because I think of the shutdown. So we had a bunch of people training at different times, and I was with the second group, and I think you were out of town at a conference or something. So we didn't get to meet you. And I was working, and I come in, and you were back. So we got to meet you for lunch, and you said, okay, find me a turtle. Cause I think it was getting later in the season and we hadn't really had turtles yet. And everyone was kind of like, where are they? And I said, okay, yeah, sure. And not expecting to see anything. And then I get back in the UTV and start heading south. And up until then, I'd only had stranded turtles, and I see something in the water and I was like, oh, a stranded turtle. And then wait a second. Well, nope, that's not one. And gotta experience that.
So you got to see the whole thing of it
The whole
crawling
thing.
out then. Oh,
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
Yeah, it was really cool. I was calling you on the radio shaking. Like I couldn't even, like I was just terrified. We got it. Y'all were close enough that Cynthia was able to come down and y'all helped, and it was good. After that we were good, but that first one was, whew, I was terrified.
Well, it's exciting. It's
Yeah.
exciting even for those of us who've seen him a lot, because each one really is a victory and a record and a hope for the future. And in association with these patrols, we want to see the turtle if at all possible, because we've got the only long-term continuous mark recapture program for these nesting turtles for this species. And so, and we only get to see the nesting turtle about 60% of the time. Now 40% of the time she's back in the water. So once our patrollers see the tracks, that's great, because that's mostly what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Rarely do they ever get to see what you did with the whole process of them coming out of the water.
Very lucky, because I want to say like at least 4 or 5 of my turtles that year I was able to get coming out of the water. I think they must like me.
Well,
I call to them.
you were lucky. It's
Yeah.
at finding nesting is skill and luck, being
Yes.
on the right place, the right time.
Yes.
Some people, it's their day off, the big nesting day happened, and they missed it all.
Yeah.
Because it's feast or famine, this arabada nesting activity, this synchronous emergence on a specific day, ours is stretched out over time and over space. But nevertheless, we do see days where there's a lot of nesting and then days of nothing.
Yeah.
So arabada behavior is starting to form.
So the Kemp's Ridleys are the only ones that do the arabada, right?
And the olive Ridleys.
Oh, okay. And how many do you see when they describe this arabada for us, and what do you see?
Well, ours are, our colleagues from Mexico would call ours mini arabadas.
Yeah.
You know, it's the largest number of nests we found in a year in Texas now is 217, but that's remarkable compared to, we'd only find one every 3 years when I started.
Yeah.
So we've come a long way,
Oh, yeah.
but we're not there. And I will explain what's happened with the numbers, why it's still troubling. But on a day when we've got a mini arabada on the Texas coast, we could have 40 nests stretched across the coast. The lion's share will be in South Texas, and Padre Island National Seashore is the most important Kemp's Ridley nesting beach in the US. So we get 55% or more of the Kemp's Ridley nests found in the US every year are at the National Seashore. So we've had patrollers that have had 2 on the beach at the same time.
Yep.
They'll be at one nest and they'll say, oop, another one's coming up. Or, oh, I see, 20 yards from me, I see another turtle. And I'm like, oh my, I'm so jealous. I've never seen 2 right there next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just this, they're responding to the same cues is what the situation is. Now and again, we have more questions every year, because it was thought that there really wasn't a social aspect to the arabadas so much. There wasn't the social facilitation as had been hypothesized decades ago by a researcher. But we're getting some information more recently that there may actually be a social component. it may be that if turtles are aggregating in a location to nest, that draws in other turtles, which could help explain the formation of some of these hotspots outside the nesting range. That, oh, we had a head start turtle that became the seed, and
Okay. Yeah.
that mushroomed into other turtles being attracted into it. Because the primary foraging area for Kemp's Ridleys is the Northern Gulf. So after they're done nesting for the year, most of these turtles will go to the waters off the Northern Gulf. Although some will go to the Southern Caribbean and some will go all the way to Florida. So what you may see is some of the turtles on their way down to Mexico or the way to us, if they see other turtles drawn into, say, Galveston, they may just decide to go there instead of coming down here, because there is imprinting. Whatever causes turtles to go back to their natal beach is not a perfect mechanism. We have individual turtles that have been documented at different areas, like a turtle that's been documented at Mustang Island, North Padre Island, Mexico, North Padre Island, San Jose Island. So there is some interchange.
Interesting.
But sea turtles have been around for millions of years. Nesting beaches come and go. So when you think of it, that's a really important adaptation to be able to have, to switch nesting beaches if your beach is disappearing.
That makes sense.
So this may serve them well in the future with climate change. So we have the marker capture work, which is really important. We have there's different ways I could go with what talking about. I'll just talk specifically about why we want to see the nesting turtle if we can. We want to see her because we want to be able to add her to that marker capture tagging database. So each record really is a victory. They're hard to come by because the Kemp's Ridleys tend to nest on windy days. Their tracks blow away quickly. They're the smallest and the lightest of the sea turtle species. They tend to also nest in association with the passage of fronts. So when people want to get off the beach, that's when we really need to be on the beach. That's when they like to nest. And that weather, that torrential downpour will obliterate their tracks. So we need to maintain spacing, and I'm sure you heard me just going over again, stay spaced apart, so that we can, following in each other's footsteps doesn't help. We need to be spaced apart so we crisscross and hopefully see that nesting turtle. Yeah. You have a better chance of finding that nest than if you just have tracks. If you just have tracks, they can peter out in soft sand, and then we have to probe for the nest. Look for that soft sand at the neck of the nest. Right. And it gives way. That's what the poachers do. That's how Cynthia learned, was from the poachers down in Mexico.
So sorry to interrupt. I was going to ask.
Oh, go ahead.
So other than social cues, what are the environmental cues? Is it a change in pressure when one of these fronts come through? Are they using the fronts to hide their tracks from nest predators? What's going on? Well,
the social is what we think with the social. It may be also Dr. Thane Wibbles down at the main nesting beach at Rancho Nuevo. He has found that the day before those arabatas, he's filmed turtles with their heads in the nearshore waters looking around. They may be looking for each other. And oftentimes, I don't know whether I'd said it during your year, Rebecca, but I'd say, if I get a call, a fisherman reported a large turtle in the water. That's okay. Let's be aware there might be nesting tomorrow. That turtle may come up. Because doing the same thing, but at a much smaller scale, being in that surf. So the cues, and it's and that's that. So down there, he's found arabata. He has found arabatas when the winds were low. Yeah. So that's when those social cues may kick in more, when you've got a higher population level and they need to nest. It's been a long time. It's June. It's getting hot. There's a lot of us here. Let's go for it.
Do it.
Okay.
So for us, it's 18 miles per hour of wind or higher, almost exclusively. Sometimes we'll find one that comes in at lower wind speeds, but it's the first wind, and I've got to publish this before somebody else does, but I always say this to help our patrollers. It's the first wind. It's not necessarily the strongest wind, because once everybody's nested, there's not nests that come out of nowhere. The first wind after calm winds. And that often is in association with fronts, especially early in the year. And in June too, it calm. And I'll ask the weather service people I'll be talking to, looking at the weather over and over and over again. When are we going to find a day when it gets over 18 and what time? And sometimes I'll deploy extra people into the field and say, we're going to get ready. We're going to get prepped in case it's a big day. Yep. And then if they don't come in, I'll say, we got all dressed up to the party and the guest didn't come. Yeah. Sometimes that happens.
There were a couple days my season that were like, all right, today's the day, we can feel it. And
it didn't happen because the turtles didn't feel it.
Yeah.
We haven't homed in exactly on what the turtles feel, how the turtles feel it. But barometric pressure is probably something. Wind speed, I know, is something. And then when levels of turtles get up to a certain point and you run out of those windy days, social may kick in. But again, more things to be quantified, pinned down by our younger biologists. There's questions out there. If we can keep that money coming into science, because that's important. It's important so that we know when these things are happening. We want to be able to manage any kind of visitation that might be in the area. We want to be able to protect the turtles, go out and document them. And it takes a large force because it's feast or famine.
Right.
And nests all over the beach, and you got to put everybody out.
Right.
You can't be in town. You can't be in town. So I'm basically at work, or I'm at my house, which is pretty close to work, for the whole nesting season, because you cannot be 2 hours away. You won't get there in time, especially when we've got 60 miles of beachfront with no road behind the dunes.
Yeah.
It's beach driving. People have to be deployed.
Yes.
And beach driving is not always the easiest sometimes there.
Right.
That's a good point.
Right.
So a few months after these Arawada days, then the turtles, the baby turtles hatch, and the hatchlings, how do they get from under the water all the way out to, under the soil, the sand, all the way out to the water?
Well, in natural condition, they just do it. There's no maternal care of the eggs. There's no unearthing of the eggs by the mother, like some species do.
Right. Yeah.
It's all on their own. They know what they're due. They're hardwired to know what to do. They've got a sharp spot on the tip of their nose called an egg tooth that pierces the eggshell. Their head comes out, the front flipper, another one. They crawl out. They've got yolk that has not yet been metabolized, that they withdraw into their abdomen, and that serves as their nutrition for the first few days of life. So all they have to do is just swim, don't stop and try to find food. So it takes about 4 days for the hatching, for those turtles to come up through the neck of the nest, and then they get active in what's called an infantile frenzy, and they go down the beach. But it's each man for themselves. They're not helping each other. It's not, hey, you move this sand here, you move that sand here, I'll be first, follow me. No, it's just each turtle for themselves. They're very primitive animals with a small brain, hardwired to do a few things that they do well. Mm-hmm. But it's important when people will see the Kemp's Ridley hatchlings and say, oh, they're kind of small and they're kind of slow, and they are, because the strategy for survival for the species has been predator swamping. You nest in arabatas, you've got a lot of eggs hatching at one time. There's a lot of hatchlings on the beach. The predators can't possibly eat them all. So you can be smaller and slower, and still a lot of them are going to get into the water. Mm-hmm. But in our situation, we still haven't gotten to the level where we could achieve predator swamping. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
So people who are anxious to take the pedal off the metal, we're not there. We're getting there, but we're not there. We got up to the largest number that had been found in the Texas coast in a year was 353 nests in 2017. And the Kemp's Ridley population overall worldwide got down to a low of only 702 nests worldwide in 1985. So we're up to about half of what that got down to. But our numbers are not, the nest numbers in Mexico and in Texas were increasing exponentially. The Kemp's Ridley Recovery Plan, which is publicly available, says the population is going to continue to increase exponentially. We will be able to, based on this, we will be able to downlist the species to threatened status by the year 2020. That didn't happen. 2010, we took a downturn. And then the numbers have fluctuated since then. It has not returned to exponential. There's been 2 population models that have been published since the recovery plan. One is a researcher from the Maine A&M campus. He predicted a return to exponential trajectory. And another one produced by some other biologists predicts that it is what it is. We've reached density dependence of juveniles in the foraging habitat, and we're not going to get any higher than what it is. And it is a much lower level than what it was historically. So
2010, does
Yeah.
that have to do with the BP oil spill?
Well, this is where being a scientist, again, is sometimes difficult. I was tasked to be the principal investigator on the natural resource damage assessment study that looked at the impacts of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill on nesting Kemp's Ridley turtles and their eggs, which the Department of Interior asked me to do it. I was humbled to do it, that we had enough turtles to serve as the barometer for the whole species. You know, just think of how far it'd come in my career. That was really, really remarkable. But it was a lot of work, so much work on top of my regular work. So we were taking samples under chain of custody and controlled amber light from unhatched eggs and samples in the field and all kinds of things. Part of the work was satellite tracking to continue that. And I had the only data on the females of when do they leave the foraging ground to go to the nesting beach, because a lot of people wanted to attribute the downturn in 2010 to the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. A lot of my sea turtle friends wanted to do that. And I had the only tracking data, the only data that showed when they leave those foraging grounds, and it's in the winter. So the turtles that were going to nest in 2010 had already left the foraging grounds before the spill occurred.
Gotcha.
It didn't cause the downturn.
Interesting.
You got to go where the data, you present the data the way the data fall.
Absolutely.
But what it doesn't let the spill off the hook, though, by any way, shape, or form. What that means is that more turtles took the year off from nesting and remained in the foraging grounds during that's when the spill occurred, and hence potentially could have been exposed to the spill.
Right.
And the numbers have fluctuated up and down, and we know that there's records of a lot of juveniles being found stranded and oiled, and there were big losses quantified of various life stages from the spill. So the downturn in 2010, again, our marker capture study and some of our other collaborative studies, and our work so much is collaborating with other entities, providing parts and pieces to trying to put the story together of what's happening with these animals. There's a researcher that looks at skeletochronology, looking at the growth rings and the humerus bones of the Kemp's Ridleys. And so we've been sending these bones off to her in North Carolina for decades. Well, she published a paper that showed that the growth rate of individual Kemp's Ridley turtles started to decline in the Gulf of Mexico beginning in 2008. So there was a change that was occurring in the marine environment before that spill occurred, which could have helped contribute to that downturn. And what we've seen in recent years is that the remigration rate, how long it takes for them to come back to nest between years, they don't in general nest every other year. So it may be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. The average across the species that we see through the marker capture tagging got up to 3.5 years for about 5 years running, most recently. In the recovery plan, it lists 2 years. That's a big difference. It's almost twice as long. So that could contribute to a lot of nests not being laid if you'd come in every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And also the double whammy is we've got fewer neophytes integrating into the population. So we're relying more and more on nesting by these remigrants that are taking longer to come in. And it may be that the fewer neophytes may be due to a longer maturation time due to the slower growth rates. But we need to keep these studies up. So we know we need to be monitoring the nesting numbers so we know the trends. And some who we all have to tighten belts, suggest, well, maybe you don't patrol on the weekends. Our patrols, we cannot just rely on visitors for reports.
No.
Our patrols are responsible for a lot of our reports, and that would leave a huge hole in our marker capture data set. It would make it, maybe somebody could mathematically jigger it for us, I don't know, but it would really decrease the reliability of it by not being able to observe. And also another suggestion was 1 patrol a day. Well, Rebecca, 1 patrol a day, when they come in every 45 minutes and the turtle can be on the nest site and the tracks are already gone.
Yep.
They're already gone. If you have 1 patrol per day, chances are you're not going to find, 90% of those nests.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm throwing a number out there, but it's a large percentage.
Right.
Yeah. There have been days that, I'm sitting there with the turtle and the tracks are already disappearing. So they go quick some of those days.
Yep. So maintaining, that consistent high effort, and we keep track of our patrol effort because it's been asked before, well, are the differences in your nest numbers when they were going up, is it an artifact of increased patrolling? So we have the number of nests per unit patrol effort. And we indeed, even though our effort went up, our nest per unit effort went down, our CPUE, it went down. So a lot of the same wildlife principles are integrated into the work that we're doing.
Yeah, sure.
So
Sure.
it crosses across that, which is wonderful.
So one thing that's really popular on Padre Island, and it's shown on the news a lot, are the hatchling releases. And I know, COVID that kind of shut some of those down too, but what goes on at a hatchling release, and how can the public find out about when one is going to happen?
Well,
Or can
yeah, this year we had 4 public releases, which I was really happy we had any.
Yeah.
Last year we didn't have any. In a normal year prior, we'd have about 20 to 25, sometimes 28
Wow.
Yeah.
releases that were open to the public. And how people learned about it was when the eggs were put into our incubation facility, I would provide a 5-day window in which there could be hatching. And I'd say to people from out of town, come to a time or target a time when several clutches are due to hatch at the same time, because that provides insurance. They're not turtles on demand. They're not show and tell.
Yeah.
They go when they go. So, and it varies based on temperature. Hotter it is, they hatch quicker. And that is influenced by, as the season goes on, the incubation duration declines, the numbers of eggs in that incubation box, and the number of those eggs that are viable, and what our care procedures are. So there's a lot of things. And so the weather also. What's the temperature going to be outside? Because that does influence what happens with the roof, the sunlight onto the roof of my facility. And I can't possibly, predict what that's going to be. So I had always done it with a window. And then once they start hatching, there's a countdown clock. And then the day before, I announce it on the Facebook page by 2:00 p.m. Facebook page and the hatchling hotline. I say, but call back before you come out just to make sure that it's still on track. Leave myself an out. And and that worked out great. I hadn't had to cancel any for a long time, many, many years, because I know what to look for with the signs of hatching and what those signs mean in terms of how many more days until they're ready to go. This year, I was told like 5 weeks before, when they were laid, I needed to provide public release days. That was really hard to do.
Yeah.
That was really hard to do because I just told you all the variables involved.
Mhm.
And so what I did, I brought home all my papers and I ciphered over all of them and I pulled out my hair and tried to look and see. And well, okay, these are in the middle of the incubation season. These are at the end, and we know we go like this. And the incubation duration also has been declining through years. I've kept track of these dates of release since 2011. So when you look at this table, you can see it, climbing down from year to year as well. So I incorporated all of that and picked the days when most clutches were due to be released and gave the days, and hallelujah, we had turtles then, but
That's
it
good.
was really stressful.
Yeah.
It was
I
it was a really hard way to do it, and it very much limits the number of releases we can have. But the managers preferred it like that
Okay.
for planning. So I don't know what the future will bring. I've heard there's going to be changes. It may be more like that model where those days are announced, 2 months in advance, and I hope the predictions are right. But it's a tricky thing to do.
It is.
Yeah.
Because so what is your goal once they start hatching? How much time do you have to get them
Well,
to the
the
shoulder?
hatching takes about 4 days,
Okay.
but it's variable. When can you tell that it's really hatching? You might have a lot of sand on top and you can't tell as well as one that's got a shallow amount of sand on top.
Okay.
So it could take up to 4 days. So I've got some warning. With these, I didn't have any that were just total surprises. They were up. I didn't have any indication that they were not hatching. So it's a count. I always had a countdown clock. And so I'd look at, it's cracks in the sand above the eggs, or circular cracks.
Mhm.
And then that presses in and then it turns into a wet spot. And I can faintly hear them repositioning in the box, moving just a little bit to crawl out a little bit. But once they enter that frenzy in the box, they've got to go. And
Okay.
we release turtles all night long.
Really?
About 3/4 of our releases are not open to the public.
Mhm.
Only a few are public releases. So yeah, they are released when they go into their frenzy. It's not show and tell. So what I had to do is to predict when clutches were going to go into their frenzy. That is really hard. That's like predicting exactly when your wife is going to go into into labor and when that baby's going to be delivered.
Right.
Because it's got to be 6:45 on that day.
Uh-huh.
I want that baby in my lap in the waiting room.
Wow.
It's hard. I mean, it's really hard. And there's going to probably be some days where it just turns into a, sorry, we had to cancel. And we had a couple that we had to cancel. And I asked, well, can't we substitute another one on the end here? Because this is a big group. No. So anyway,
Well, hopefully
we'll see. We'll
for
see what the
next
future
year,
brings, because they're really, really, really popular.
They are.
Yeah.
And
Everybody loves them.
yeah, we get about 16,000 people that come to each release.
Each
and
one? Wow.
well, not each one, sorry, each year collectively.
Yeah.
Collectively,
Uh-huh.
but this year we had 4,000 collectively
Wow.
for 4 releases.
That's good.
But and we didn't hardly talk about it at all because there was so much uncertainty that it would really happen, and then the COVID factor too.
Yeah.
But it's about 16,000 in total. But we know that there's people that come to town that miss it. They came at the very end of the release window, or they didn't read the table correctly, and they'll say, oh, I came last year, but I missed it, by a day. Because sometimes they'll go at the beginning of the window And if you come at the end, it's too late. So I always advise also target a time when several are due to be released at the same time and come at the beginning of the release window.
Right.
Well, some people can't,
Yeah.
because
Right.
of their schedule.
Yeah,
They take
you
a chance.
have to come when you're here.
So the ecotourism, this is definitely an ecotourism revenue generator.
It really is.
I- The people, a lot of people coming from out of town, planning to come to these releases, putting
Out
it
of
on their
state.
bucket
Mhm.
list. Yep,
Yes.
out of state,
Yeah, absolutely.
even
I wanna
even
see it.
outside the country. We've had people
Mhm.
plan
Yeah.
and come to them.
And it's cool. It is so cool just to see them doing their thing and going to the water. And I even because I was able to help out with two of them, and just being there as a helper, seeing all the people that come out to see these turtles and how passionate they are. And you see little kids that this is something that they're not gonna see, just every day. So this is something that's gonna obviously stay with them for their whole lives. So it is a cool program. So hopefully next year you'll get to do more. And if people are interested, just keep tabs on their social media and their hatching hotline.
Yes, and we can provide you that information so you can link it to this
Yep.
podcast
And
if you'd
we'll
like.
put it in our social media stuff as well.
We will.
Yeah, let's change it up a little bit and talk about sea turtles in general. You mentioned that Kemps are endangered and other sea turtles are endangered as well. What are some of the reasons for this?
Sea turtles have we have there's actually 6 sea turtle species that occur in Texas, but the olive Ridley has just been one record of one stranded turtle. So we'll focus on the 5. They're threatened and endangered. They all became depleted due to human activities. Taking of the eggs, slaughter of nesting females, hawksbills. They use the scutes, those keratin that's on the top shell, for barrettes and combs and jewelry. The tortoise shell. They ate green turtles. There's a green turtle cannery. And between severe freezes and overharvest of green turtles, they decimated the green turtle in Texas. They're repopulating and rebuilding, and that could be a whole nother podcast talking about our rescue of stranded turtles and the heroic efforts of this past February during that terrible storm.
Yeah.
13,000 green turtles.
I saw a lot of that on social media that y'all saved a lot of turtles.
Yeah.
It was quite an event.
I bet.
But also, again, public education being so critical because the public brought us a lot. They're distributed so widely, and the backside of our barrier islands are just as remote as the front side. We don't have many marinas. We go Baffin Bay for one on the backside, and then our Bird Island Basin, and then you don't have anything else till you get down to Port Mansfield.
Right.
So
what should somebody do if you said the public brought you a lot? What should someone do if they see a stranded turtle or a nesting female?
Yep. Immediately call our number. It's 361-949-8173, extension 226. That goes to my desk, and because we want to get those calls immediately. Okay. That's not the same number for the hatchlings, though. The hatchlings got a recorded message.
Okay.
So if they are threatened and endangered species, so they're not permitted to just pick them up and move them unless they have gotten permission from us as Good Samaritans. Because it could be argued, well, they're taking them away to slaughter them and eat them themselves. You want to be able to spot the poachers from the people that are helping, because poaching still does happen, sadly. So they'll call me and it will say, okay, you've got one that's in this remote area. It'd be really hard for us to get to it. Please bring it in. We'll meet you at, this marker 37 boat dock or at Bird Island Basin, and we'll get it from you. Or some even during that cold snap, a lot of them were coming from the Naval Air Station in the the young men from the naval base would bring them out, and they'd have them in the back of their car. Surf, people that were windsurfing would have them with them and bring them out to our lab. So it was really nice to see the outpouring of assistance that these poor docile turtles had, because they were incapacitated due to the cold.
Mhm.
And if they weren't rescued, they would die due to exposure or due to predators. The coyotes will eat them alive. The birds will
Sure.
pick out their eyes.
Sure.
And they bleed out. Grizzly, important that they get rescued quickly. If they're out too long, they'll succumb.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. So,
So the other threats, of course, now development is a threat to nesting beaches. We have other threats such as pollution, entanglement and ingestion of marine debris, boat propellers, red tides, different fisheries too. It's not just shrimping.
Mhm.
Crabbing can, of course, long lining can be dangerous. Gill netting, from time to time, illegal gill netting will occur in Texas waters by the launches coming from Mexico and fishing in the South Texas waters.
Mhm.
Still happens.
Yeah.
Hard to get rid of.
So I've heard about sandcastles may be a problem. Is that tell us about that?
Yes, it's best that when you're done recreating on the beach, just flatten the area where you were. Don't leave a big hole.
Okay.
Don't leave a big castle. Don't leave the pop-up structure from your little pop-up
Yeah.
shade structure. It did fold up well, and you just leave it. That happens all the time out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And don't leave your lawn chairs out overnight. What it's for is you don't want the turtles that are nesting to run into obstacles, be it a sandcastle or the little hatchlings to become caught in big holes, or even nesters in big holes, and hatchlings deterred by big castles. They have to go, the longer they would have to go around something, the more time they're exposed to predators on the beach.
Sure. So we can have fun on the beach, but we need to leave it flat like we found
Yep.
it, and take everything that we brought with us.
this has been a public service announcement.
Yes.
Yep. And pick up a little bit of other trash while you're at it that somebody else left.
I always do that. I always grab one of they have free bags there for you to get if you got to use the porta potty, which I can't go anywhere without using the porta potty. Use the porta potty, come out, grab one of those bags, and as you're walking back, just fill it up with all the plastic spoons and toothbrushes and everything that you find as you go.
Lots of shoes on
Flip flops,
the beach. Lots
whatever,
of shoes.
toys,
That was something we would do on slower days. We would see, all right, we're going to pick up all the shoes we see on our breaks, and who can pick up the most shoes, or straws, or what certain kind of trash we would just,
bottle caps.
Lots of
bottle
trash.
caps are crazy out there. Yeah.
So you mentioned what people can do if they're, say, visiting Padre Island and they see a stranded or nesting turtle. What are some things that non-beachgoers or non-turtle science research people can do to help these populations?
Well, that adage, that public service announcement to recycle, reuse, and diminish the amount of trash you've got. A lot of trash ends up in the oceans. We don't need that. Just be aware and be a good steward and you can be an ambassador. You can tell your friends about this work so they can support it too. A lot of people don't have any idea. A lot of people still don't even know we're a unit of the national park system, much less that we have sea turtles nesting at our beach. So we get a lot of people that volunteer. They're teachers, and they'll come and volunteer for a few weeks, and they'll go back to Iowa or Indiana or Wisconsin, and they'll give their students lessons about our turtles here. It's a great thing you could do is to teach. You can find a lot of things on the website and material that you can base your lessons on. And our visitor center is glad to help people with questions and provide information as well. Just reduce your plastic use. Yeah. We all use too much plastic. We can cut that down. Yeah. So things like that are really important.
Yeah, and we had our recent podcast came out with Jace Tunnel talking about.
Oh,
nurses.
yes.
So we we'll direct people to that podcast if you want
Oh,
to
don't
learn a
make me
lot about
follow him.
turtles.
Don't make me follow him. He's good. He's I had him be one of my keynote speakers at the Sea Turtle conference that I organized, and he was really good.
He's
I was proud of him. He's great.
especially
speaker.
because one, it's a bit of a depressing topic, and two, people are like, I don't care about little plastic beads, but man, it's what he has to say is so interesting.
It's
Mhm.
very interesting. He delivers
learned a
it
lot.
well. He reminds me so much of his father, Dr. Tunnell, who worked at A&M Corpus. His father'd be so proud of him now, I'm sure. He does a great job. Yeah, he's gonna outshine me, but oh well.
But people are more excited about turtles, but we won't talk
Well,
about
I hope they are. See, we've suffered for a long time. We suffer from flipper syndrome because everybody, if there's a marine mammal, boy, everybody flocks away. I'll lose them from their patrols. So I'll be with the marine mammal. Everybody loves the marine mammals and wants to hear about them, which is great. I love the marine mammals too. Manatees, killer whales, you name, they're just wonderful animals. But and then birds. When I was in graduate school, everybody was into birds, and they just couldn't understand me liking these scaly reptiles. In fact, when I went back to Cornell, in fact, one of my wildlife biology teachers, I showed him a picture of a nesting turtle. And he said, "You like these?"
That's how I feel here. It's a
Oh,
lot of
funny.
it's a lot of deer research, and I'm a
Yeah.
butterfly
Oh,
person, and
yeah.
come on, they're cool too.
They are cool too. It takes all of them. They're part of the ecosystem. Absolutely.
It does.
Important pollinators.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
But
Okay.
Turtles are definitely
Yeah.
cuter than nurdles. Though.
Turtles are a bit cuter
Yeah,
than turtles.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I agree, especially those little hatchlings. The
Yes.
green turtle hatchlings are gorgeous too. And
Are
the
they?
loggerheads, we've got a few clutches of those this year, mostly Kemps.
Yeah. I'll try to find a picture. I think we did a release. It was your birthday, and we happened to have, I think, a green, a Kemp's, and a loggerhead hatchling, and we have a picture. I think it's on the Facebook. It's side by side, all three of them, and
Cool.
it was
It's neat to see the difference. They
Yeah.
are so different in behavior
Yep.
and in appearance, and it gets frustrating because I'll have people that are experienced in loggerheads try to tell me about what Kemp's Ridleys do based on their loggerhead experience in us. It's a different species. It behaves differently. I know what I'm talking about. It's different. So,
Okay. So,
but they are beautiful.
Yeah.
Each one of them.
Yeah, they are. For this last bit of the podcast, we're going to do some more fun questions, and also maybe a couple of future career advice that you could give as well. So some people like to watch the world burn, and I'm one of them. So I would like to know what your least favorite turtle is.
Oh,
Yeah, try to cause a riff in the turtle
a
community.
dead one.
What?
Oh, that's a good answer.
That is a good. That's a good answer.
Very good answer.
She loves them all.
Yeah. Do you have? So you do a lot of work with Kemps. Would you say they're your favorites?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But closely followed by greens.
Yeah. Greens are.
And
pretty
I love
cool.
the leatherbacks too. They're all really great in their own way.
Yeah.
But Kemp's, I didn't show you, but let me see if you could see this. I dedicated my career to trying to help save the Kemp's Ridley, which was almost lost in one human generation, a blink of an eye. Here's my graduation ring for my dad, 1947, the Naval Academy, the year that the famous film was made. The population was robust. Here's my graduation ring from Cornell, 1981. I started here in 1980. Some people thought it was already too late. The population had been depleted too much. So between one generation right here, him to me, it was almost lost. And so it is my favorite because it's in the most dire straits, and it needed my help. Yeah. And I've tried to do a good job to try to help save it.
It did. And I know you've had helpers along the way, but
so many. I did so many.
I think we could safely say that you've been a huge part of the fact that they are still here on the planet.
Yep.
Well, I've been blessed to be able to continue with this work, to see that we've made strides, you know, but it's still got problems with the population. I have a good friend, Dr. Pamela Plotkin. She's the first female head of the Texas Sea Grant. She's up at College Station, and she was one of my first employees. And she said, Donna, you helped save the Kemp's Ridley once, you can help save it again. I said, well, I'm a little older than when I took that on for the first time, but I'll see what I can do.
But with age comes more wisdom and
That's right.
experience. So
That's right.
Oh, I've got so much more I've learned from lessons. With age, you don't become as embarrassed to talk about things that you would have done differently and admit your mistakes. And there've been mistakes, people I depended on that I never should have, because they just weren't going to come through for me no matter how hard I tried. And assumptions I made that just because they've got a master's degree with a thesis option doesn't mean that they are committed to publishing. That was a hard lesson to learn.
Oh
You probably know that one.
gosh. Oh my gosh. Don't even get me started. I sadly am really batting zero with the master's graduates publishing their own work. Hopefully Rebecca will turn that around for me so that I don't have to publish it for her.
we're
But
working on stuff.
but yeah,
Good.
it
Stuff in the
seems
works.
that's just, even though you pounded in your head into their heads, hey guys, this is really just recreation unless you publish it. And to call what we do recreation on a good day is a stretch, you know. You're out
Oh
there.
yeah, it's hard work.
I mean, right. So let's get it published. Okay. We got to get this published. And yeah. It's a
Absolutely.
constant battle. But
It is. It
But-
is.
But
Oh,
you
wow.
have, I mean, seriously though, you have done so much. for
Thank
the
you.
Kemps
Thank you.
Ridley. So
Thank you. And
You-
and I've worked with wonderful people, and I couldn't have done it alone. I've tried to inspire them. I've tried to, because I needed help to do what we needed to do. I've tried to inspire them that we're trying to make a difference here. We're
uh-huh.
trying to save a species for future generations. Wouldn't it be terrible if nobody got to see that turtle dance
Hmm.
ever again? If nobody got to see those little puny hatchlings, crawl slowly down the beach, turn around, take it
Yeah.
all in, and crawl some more, and see the difference from the other species.
Yeah.
Just to know that they're still there, and they're an important part of our South Texas heritage, and we should be proud of them. So,
Yeah,
but
absolutely. I mean,
thank you for the compliments. It's definitely a team effort, and I hope that team effort is going to continue. And with H2, I'm trying to make sure that I work with a lot of exercises that provide training, like being the president for that conference. That was so much work. It is no glory. I don't know if you've ever done it before, but it is no glory to the
planning
president.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is work, 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 work. But I did it for them because it's fantastic training. There hadn't been a
Yep.
major sea turtle conference in Texas in 20 years.
Yeah.
Really?
They needed one. Yep. And when it's in other states, our volunteers can't afford to travel over there, and a lot of people from the
Right.
programs can't afford. So I wanted to bring it to them, and other things too, because we got to educate you, to help. We need more researchers. We need more people interested in conservation. We need people to communicate. We need all three of those approaches. We need people to help with all those to continue into the future. Don't let me roll around in my grave saying nobody's continuing this work.
So you've definitely inspired a lot of even just
Absolutely.
technicians I've worked with have been very inspired by the work that we're able to do with you. So
Absolutely.
yeah, you're leaving a good legacy of former biotechs.
Well, and they'll go on to other things too. Certainly not all of them are going to go on to sea turtles. And it just tickles me so much when some of them will write back and say, it was really meaningful, the work that I did with you. And now they're professors. Or now I've got one that as a volunteer, she's really special, but she's now a physician. And, whatever field they go into, if they want to make a difference.
Yeah,
The big thing is that's
that's true.
what I want to see.
Yeah.
But
So
we need some sea turtle people too, though.
we do. So what's the biggest piece of advice that you would give to somebody who's really interested in, a career similar to yours, a career working with sea turtles?
Work hard, be willing to move around to get your foot in the door for an opportunity, because you don't always just land right with the job that you want.
Sure.
And you certainly, I mean, it's as much odds as hitting the lottery that you're going to go in as the boss of a program right straight out of college, unless it's a small program. But some have the expectations that they will.
Yeah.
So have realistic expectations that getting your foot in the door is going to be challenging. Get experience, get that volunteer experience, keep up your grades. I'm looking for the year-round staff, the permanent staff. I like to see people with a master's degree now, because we need to write, and I'm counting on them to be writers. So take that writing class. I was a STEM girl. I didn't like, I took scientific writing because I didn't want to do the speech, but that was an important class. I'm very glad I took it. But that writing, become a good writer, get out of your shell if you're shy, because speaking is important.
Rebecca,
no matter what field you're in.
Yeah, a little bit.
We need to work on that. We need to work on that.
Yeah.
Have confidence in yourself, though. If you and females, this is a problem with females. It's borne out by the research. I get attacked sometimes when I say this in front of men, but females often will underrate themselves on job assessments. So it's a self-assessment, whereas the men will oftentimes rate themselves higher.
Yep.
So have confidence and give credit to yourself for the experience that you've got.
Yes.
But really get that experience and really walk the walk and walk the talk. Don't just talk. I guess I see a lot of talkers too. They talk good about what they did, but I don't see what they did.
Right.
So be the real deal.
That's
honest and ethical.
Yep.
That's
great advice.
Important. That's my view. That's the view of Donna.
I agree.
So,
I think you hit everything that I tell at least all of my techs. I'm like, yeah, everything you did. I said it's not going to be easy, but keep working. Work hard.
Yeah, if you really want it, you've got to keep working at it. You may need to go to Florida. They got a lot of sea turtle projects there to come back here. But there are going to be more and more opportunities as time goes on if these turtles continue to increase up and down the coast, not just at the National Seashore, but Sea Turtle Inc. hires people. And Dr. Chris Marshall from the Upper Texas coast has a graduate program and has Texas Master Naturalists and some people helping him as well. So there are opportunities spread around.
Yes, definitely.
But it's got to continue to be a need.
Yeah.
The government needs to remember that this is important.
That all.
Yes, we're not saying that other things aren't important.
Right.
Never said that, but these are important, and we're not ready to take. We're not ready to just bail out.
Right. All pieces of the ecosystem are important. We don't want to lose one. We may.
That's right.
It might seem inconsequential, but we don't know all of the implications if we lose one part or one piece.
Right.
So yeah, all equally important.
And this one was due to human activities, clearly.
Yes.
One can argue that if it was a natural extinction, maybe that's something different, but this was clearly due to human activities.
Yes.
So I felt we had a moral obligation to try and bring it back.
Yes, we do. So let's have a little fun.
This is our fun question.
Yes, this is our last question for you. We ask everybody to share a biology blunder. And these happen to us quite often. I think we're just out there in the wild and we're working with animals and the weather and equipment, and stuff goes wrong and hilarity ensues sometimes. So would you share a biology blunder
I
with
have
us?
so many.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it happens all the time that batteries will be inoperable in a GPS and a camera. Just and boy, oh boy, I take it all so seriously. It's hard for me to laugh about so many of them.
I
I
have a bunch
understand.
from I have quite a few from my time working
Okay, tell
on
yours.
Turtle
Tell yours.
Patrol.
Let's hear
Where
one
do
of
we
Rebecca's.
start? Okay, so it was, I think, our last big Arbata day. So it was later in the season, and I had been camping down island. So a lot of the Turtle Patrol, some of us will stay on the down side of the island just because it's a lot of traveling every day. And I think it was my day coming out, and it's a big turtle day, and I had already found, I think, at least one nest, and I've hit the getting to the closer to headquarters, and so I'm getting to where there's more people, and we're passing our other turtle patrollers, and I'm driving in my UTV, and out in the distance I see what I thought may have been like a little green turtle, but by the time I got there I didn't see anything, and I'm like, I'm not seeing anything, and let me just stand here for a minute, maybe if that was a turtle it'll wash back up. So I don't see anything, and I'm like, all right, okay, the next turtle patroller, I'll just say, hey, keep an eye around this area. There might be something there. So I get back in the UTV, go a little bit, a couple of feet, and I'm stopped by some visitors, and they're like, oh, what's going on? And so, when we get stopped, we say, all right, well, it's a turtle day. This is what it means. If you see a turtle that's stranded or nesting, try and flag one of us down, let us know. And because they're asking about turtles. It was a teenager and his dad. And I'm like, yeah, if you see a stranded one, just let us know. And I look back in the mirror, and sure enough, that little green sea turtle's back there. And I'm like, okay, there he is. I'm like, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to go take care of that. And they're like, yeah, sure thing. So I drive the UTV back, and I get out, grab the turtle. It has some injuries on it. So I'm like, I'm parked right next to the water. I take a step back to the UTV to call it in. And so typically when we call stuff in, as you are well aware, we call one person for if we have a stranded turtle, and then we call you, Donna, for if there's a nesting turtle. And I have my little radio in my hand. I have the turtle in my other hand, and I turn around, and there's a Kemp's who has just come to the shore, and she's like looking at all of us. And I'm standing there with my little injured green sea turtle, just like, okay. So the gentleman and the son I had been talking to, I was like, can you guys help us direct traffic so we can get her up the beach? And I'm like, I'm just going to put my turtle down in the UTV. And so she makes her way up the beach, and she's starting to do her digging. And I'm like, I don't know how to make this radio call right now. So I call, I'm like, both of you guys. And there was just quiet on the radio for a second, because I think everyone's trying to figure out, wait, who responds first? Because she called both numbers. And finally you answered, and I was like, I have a nesting turtle and a stranded turtle. And everything was fine. Turtle, she laid her eggs. Stranded turtle got picked up. So it was probably one of the more bizarre incidents I ever had, and working there. But yeah, that was one of my weird.
That is a pretty unique incident, I would think. I mean, I never worked there, but
Oh yeah, that's unique. That's
Yeah.
unique.
It was
Well, that's good luck though. To
Yeah.
get two like that.
Yeah, it was my last turtle of the season too. So I was like, all right, like,
Well, that's memorable.
Go out on a good note. We got 'em.
Ah, well, good for you. That's a good one.
Yeah.
And then we scooped her up to come and study butterflies.
Yeah. And
Well,
weeks
I'm
after that,
glad.
I was
Keep her here. She's a great student, and I can't wait to read that publication.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're working on it. Awesome.
Well,
Keep the
Donna-
momentum up. That'd be another piece of advice. It's difficult if you put it down
Yeah.
to then go back to it. to try to carve out time and
Yep.
just keep plugging away.
Spend a little bit of time on it every single day.
Yeah.
So it's always in your mind and you're always improving it. Yeah.
That's the plan. I hope.
Donna, thanks for spending time with us this morning.
Yes,
I learned
yes.
Oh,
so much.
So much. I'm
my
so glad to be
pleasure. My
here.
pleasure. I had a great time speaking with both of you and helping to educate people about these magnificent animals that we're so blessed to have here
We
in
are.
South Texas as part of our natural heritage. It's wonderful.
We are.
Well, if you have future questions, don't hesitate to call. And if we need to fill in with anything else, if something didn't record quite right, just let me know.
Okay.
We'll do that. All right. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Talk on the Wild Side is a production of the Caesar Kleberg Wildlife Research Institute of Texas A&M University, Kingsville. Funding for this project is provided by the Harvey Weil Sportsman Conservationist Award by the Rotary Club of Corpus Christi. Editing was completed by the talented Gabby Olivas, Andrew Lowry, and Trey Kendall. We thank the TAMAC Distance Learning Lab for all their help and cooperation.